You're all in for a seamless treat, my friends. A seamless treat. Rabbi Katie spoke eloquently about all the hiding we do in life and how much of a release and relief it can be when we're found. That's what I heard her say. Physically, spiritually, and emotionally, instead of hiding from the realities of being human. It was an uplifting message about the incredible power of sharing our legacy while we are alive. Or in Rabbi Katie's words, if someone from Temple can make sure others can get in, because one of the sides of that door is locked, thank you. I know you love to help. I'm just a one-person operator now. Thank you. Thank you. In Rabbi Katie's words, and I quote, "Letting other people find us, see us, and love us will help us live our lives better." No, you're helping more than anyone. Thank you. So here's the important part. There's no better rabbi, minister, or speaker to continue this conversation than the visionary I've asked to speak on this holiest day of the year. Why? Because our program director, Jan Reisman, our president, Paula Jacobson, have planned for Temple to have sacred conversations about the power of sharing our legacy while we're alive and living well by planning for dying well. At the end of this hour, following Q&A with Reverend Dr. Morris, you will receive from Jan and Paula a handout that Scott and others have made possible entitled The 5 Wishes. So I just want to be clear, this session is not a one-hit wonder. It's going to lead to more sacred conversations that I hope you'll spread the word about to others who aren't here. There are going to be more conversations in the fall, and I won't give you the dates, but I hope that you will return for what follows and look for it. So let me tell you some things about today's speaker that even those of you who've known Dr. Morris for decades may not know. First, he's not a one-hit wonder. In fact, when he was a pitcher, he actually pitched a no-hitter in Atlanta. Second, Atlanta is one of the cities I have traveled to with Scott. Cincinnati 2, Jerusalem 3, Jerusalem with his wife Mary, who is here on the first interfaith trip in Memphis for community faith leaders ever, with Scott, his amazing wife Mary, and 9 other leading ministers and their spouses. Since I'm sure Scott is going to lead off with a great story, he's a master speaker. A quick story from 3 nights ago when another one of the 10 who went on our Israel trip, Pastor Keith Norman and I spoke at the 25th anniversary of Hope Presbyterian Church and its founding pastor, Craig Strickland. I want to share this story just to demonstrate just how far we have torn down the walls that divide race, religion, and background. This is the story that happened 3 nights ago. Interfaith used to mean having lunch or attending some community event, you know, rabbi, minister, priest, give a prayer. Now it means black and white pastors and their spouses traveling to Israel together and not having lunch, but having dinners in each other's homes. So here's the story. I race into this event to speak, and Keith Norman, who calls me his twin even though he's tall, dark, and handsome while I'm short, white, and aging. Keith tells me to sit with him at the table in the back, since there's no head dinner table. There's just a podium like this to speak from. And the honoree, Craig Strickland, the senior pastor of Hope, notices me and Keith in the back, walks quickly to our table before the MC starts the program, and says, "Micah, Keith, what are you doing sitting back here?" And the African-American leading pastor, Keith Norman, says, "This is where they put all the blacks and the Jews." I'm not exaggerating a word. My, how far we've come. When a black Baptist minister can say that, hugging a Jewish rabbi and white evangelical, you know why Memphis is the model for interfaith relationships like no other city in America, which leads me to the best exemplar of that, the Reverend Dr. Scott Morse. The brilliance of this great writer, minister, physician, who also happens to be one of my dearest friends, is no longer the history of the Church Health Center, which I call, by the way, one of the most Jewish places I know for the sacred work the CHC does. The extraordinary thing, and I'm going to close, is not the history. It's the vibrancy that's ongoing, the dynamism, the ongoing story of the Church Health Center over 20 years later. Too many places, let's be honest, I don't know where you work, we don't do this here, but too many places, including churches and synagogues, simply ride on the fumes of the past rather than have the vision of an even brighter tomorrow. So the final thing you may not know about this ordained Methodist minister and world-class physician is that in Scott's eyes, this is how he lifts me up as his friend. He really believes the best is yet to come for Memphis when we take to heart what is ahead and what we can do together. And these High Holy Days are supposed to be about that too. So thank you, Scott, for reminding me and us of these holy days and renewing ourselves, and for living as long as these bodies God has put us in allow. Scott's talk, "How old was Moses when he died?" will become very clear when I move out of the way. Scott Morse.
So, it's one of those things you should never do is talk after Micah. I get that. Do I need to, are we good on sound? We're good here? Rashad, we're good? Okay. All right, so today is the anniversary of Game 1 of the 1965 World Series between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Minnesota Twins. Now, the very day that Sandy Koufax did not pitch, you all know that. He didn't pitch because it was Yom Kippur. We all know that he didn't pitch. What we forget is that Koufax did go on to pitch 3 games. The very next day, he lost. He then pitched 2 shutouts and pitched the shutout to win the 7th game and ended up being the most valuable player of the World Series. Now, on that day that Koufax didn't pitch, Don Drysdale did. Now, Drysdale, big guy, the antithesis of Koufax, died, went to his death, most proud of the record that he still holds in Major League Baseball today. He hit 154 batters. He thought that was great. So, on Game 1, the assumption was this would be a great pitcher's duel between Don Drysdale and the pitcher for the Twins, Jim Mudcat Grant. Only, by the end of the 3rd inning, it was clear it was not going to be. Drysdale had given up 6 runs, and I'm guessing you all know the story, but if not, it's worth telling one more time. So the manager, Walter Austin, comes out to talk to Drysdale, which nobody did that because Drysdale hit 154 batters, and he was likely to hit the manager as well. He comes out, and before Austin can say anything, he calls him Skip, which is what he called the manager, and he goes, "Skip, I know you wish I was Jewish too." So nothing makes me happier than when Micah calls the Church Health Center the most Jewish institution he knows. I truly feel that way, and Mary, my wife, and I would tell you that we feel as much Jewish as we do Christian. I always remember that Jesus was never a Christian. He lived and died Jew, and he just sought to be faithful to Yahweh as possible, and so do I. So it is for that reason that I could not be more excited, and actually a little nervous about being here, knowing that the situation is not normal, but everything Micah said is true. So I am truly grateful for the invitation. I'm a little unnerved by the fact that Micah invited me to come here to give an uplifting discussion on death. So how old was Moses when he died? 120. So when I was in seminary, I spent my first year there as a student chaplain at the Masonic home in a small town in Connecticut. And every time the people that I was in charge with got together, there was this old guy who sat in the back, and before I ever said a word, called out, "How old was Moses when he died?" I mean, everybody in the room knew it because the guy had been doing it for 20 years. We all knew that Moses was 120. But I'd like to just read for you from the 34th chapter of Deuteronomy, the few verses about Moses' death. Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho. The Lord showed him the whole land, Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the Negev and the plain, that is the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zor. The Lord said to him, "This is the land of which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there." Then Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, at the Lord's command. He was buried in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor. But no one knows his burial place to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His sight was unimpaired, and his vigor had not abated. His sight was unimpaired, and his vigor had not abated. So Moses doesn't get to go into the promised land. Michael, you'll have to explain it to me. I don't really get why Moses doesn't go. Apparently he messes up around getting water to come out of a rock. I'm not sure exactly why that means you don't get to go into the promised land, but he doesn't. But he lives to be 120 with his sight and his vigor. I'll go for that. That works for me. We all envision that that's how we're going to die, right? I'm going to live with my sight and my vigor until I'm 120, and then I'm going to drop dead. That's what we anticipate. So I'm going to live like this, and then I'm going to have a heart attack or my stroke, and then I'm going to be dead. Okay? Oh, that would be great. The truth is that only is going to happen to about 15% of us. Only 15% are going to die that way. Another 15% are going to live here. We're going to have a stroke or a heart attack. We're going to recover, but not fully back to where we were. We'll live another couple of years. We'll have another stroke or a heart attack. We'll recover. And then we'll die. That's not so bad. I mean, I could deal with that. But that's, again, only another 15%. What about the rest of us? 65 to 70% of us are going to be up here, and then we're just going to start this little dwindling. And then we're going to die. And that's going to take 8 to 10 years. That's how it works, y'all. Those are the statistics about how we're going to die. That last part didn't sound so good, did it? You know, what we're here today for, the Day of Atonement, the Day of At-One-ment, it is mostly about how do we live the life well lived. But it's also important for us to talk about how do we die well. Now, I'm absolutely convinced that it's not possible to die with dignity, that death takes away your dignity. So set aside that concept. But we do have to figure out how do we die well. And we're not doing a very good job about that. Not in America, for sure. Yes, we need to focus on living well, but we also need to focus on dying well, and that's what I want to spend a few minutes today talking about, and then I want to leave time for discussion. So I'd like to begin by telling you a couple of personal stories that I hope will be illustrative of what I think we need to advance. So, early on when the Church Health Center opened was right at the time when the AIDS epidemic was just beginning. It was at a time when we actually were beginning to have some drugs that we could treat AIDS with, not necessarily anywhere close to where it is today, but you could have the potential to prolong life. The drugs were expensive. There were only a few places to get it, and in Memphis it was primarily focused on the med and something called the Adult Special Care Clinic. So I see this man, he clearly has the symptoms of AIDS. I do the test, it's positive. I tell him he has AIDS. I tell him we have a plan. But we work on getting his appointment, it's all set up, and then he tells me, I'm not going. I'm not going. I'm not taking the drugs. I'm not going to the Adult Special Care Clinic. Why not? Well, he had acquired AIDS in his prior life. He had used drugs, he had been sexually promiscuous, that's how he got the disease. But to get the drugs, he would have to go to the Adult Special Care Clinic, and he was afraid that people that he now wanted to look up to him would see him. Because he was now a Christian. And he actually had a radio show and talked about being a great Christian. And he was worried that those people would see him and they would know his past. So he didn't go. He would come to see me occasionally when he felt really bad, but he never took the drugs. And he told people that he had cancer and he was dying from cancer. One night, in the middle of the winter, about 7 o'clock at night, I get a phone call. It's his mother telling me that he's on his deathbed. He's surrounded with all of his friends, but there's only one person he wants to talk to, me. And will I come? So I say, sure. Where am I going? Well, he's in Hurt Village. It's in the middle of the winter. Hurt Village doesn't exist anymore, but there's a good reason it doesn't exist. It was one of the worst housing projects Memphis ever had. It's 7 o'clock at night, in the middle of the winter. It was not a place I needed my white face. Thankfully, one of my medical assistants, Stan, who's now a Memphis policeman, said to me, Doc, maybe I ought to go with you. Stan was African American. I go, Stan, that's a great idea. I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm wearing my white coat as we wander through there. It was pretty clear who I was. We weren't quite sure where we were going, but we found this apartment where people were standing outside holding vigil, and they called us up. And we walked up, and this apartment had no electricity. He had lost everything. There were just candles. And we walked into the room. The smell of death was everywhere. He was laying on the couch. He saw me come in and he motioned me to come toward him. And I came, and then I kneeled down beside the couch. And he clearly had something he wanted to say to me, and we didn't have any greeting whatsoever. But he leaned over and whispered into my ear, "Do you think God will forgive me?" I wasn't Moses. You know, I didn't have the ability to say, you will be forgiven. But I said, I believed you will. And I got up and I left. And then he died during the night. So, that need for personal atonement is absolutely something we all need. And how do we do that before we get to that point is something we are here to reflect on today, I know. But none of us need to die like that. None of us need to. The second story is very personal. My own mother died when I was a freshman in college of ovarian cancer. She was diagnosed in the spring of my senior year in high school. I'm not quite sure why the cancer surgeons told my father and me this. I was an only child, but they said she would probably live at least another 10 years, not a problem. That was not a very good prognosis because it wasn't close to being true. But that's what they said. And then my mother never really got fully well, but she got well enough, and she was out and about. And then that summer, just a few months later, I was doing what I normally did in the summer back then with my friends. I loved going on rafting trips in North Carolina. And so I was planning on going on a trip. And then my mother came up and said, "Can I go with you?" Every young man's dream. Their mother on a rafting trip with them. So I said, "Sure." And so she goes, and we're on the trip, and everything's going well. And then right at the end of the river, there was a very large rapid. And we had pulled over, and we had a guide, and we were scouting this rapid. And my mother got scared. I can understand why she did. And I said, "Look, you don't need to do this. We'll just meet you on the other side." And she was prepared to do that. And then she said, "Why not? Why not?" And so we got back into the raft, and together we went down the river. We got in the middle of the rapid, and the point where I should have leaned forward, I leaned backward, and like that, I was in the water. And I wasn't in the water for more than 10 or 15 seconds when my mother, with the help of a friend, reached over and pulled me back into the raft. And then we finished the trip. A few months later, my mother had another crisis, and then she died. She died at Emory Hospital. I was only 19 years old. I didn't fully understand how this worked, but there came a point where she changed her breathing. Dr. Bronstein would have known immediately that the end was near. And so when that happened, the doctor told my father, and my father suggested that I go to a movie. And I did. I didn't know any better. And so I was in a movie when my mother died. I've never forgotten that. It was not the best last memory. And it's not what we should do with our families. But forever, what I really had in my head was that image of the raft trip. Falling out of the river. My mother, when I least expected it, is the person who brought me back in. What that has represented to me over the years is that the uncertainty of what was happening there is not a bad thing. Being comfortable with uncertainty is actually a good thing. We can't fully understand the future. Our faith is not about knowing. That's what worshiping a golden calf is about. Being certain. Faith is, by definition, something that incorporates doubt. Faith without doubt renders your faith idolatrous. So that vision of being in the raft together is the one I want us to focus on. Because we are in the raft together. And we need each other. We can't go through life alone, and we can't go through death alone. The death is something nobody should ever face alone. No one should ever have to die alone. And we shouldn't have to die pretending like we're not going to die. It doesn't work like that. So we want to present to you today, and as we move forward, a concept that's known as the 5 wishes. And Paula, are you here because I came without one? Could you give me one? So, here, I'll just take one from here. Thank you. So, a number of you, I feel certain, knew Raza Delaware. Dr. Delaware was one of the best cancer surgeons Memphis has ever had. He, ironically, I would say, developed inoperable pancreatic cancer. His daughter is a medical oncologist, having to deal with the fact that her father had pancreatic cancer and there was really nothing that she could do. It was a terrible situation. That they were 2 very learned physicians, but they were also a father and a daughter dealing with his inevitable death. Now, I had the great privilege of sitting down with Raza about a month before he died and talking about the situation, his own understanding of death, both from a physician and going through this tragedy of his own life. And then after his death, sitting down with his daughter and say, what did this mean to you? And we were able to videotape. And one of the things I would encourage you to do is go watch this video of the conversation of me talking to Raza and Asma, his daughter. We can get you the link to it, or you can go find it on YouTube if you just enter the conversation in my name or Raza's name. But I would encourage you to use this as a tool to begin your own sacred conversation. It doesn't matter that Raza's Muslim. As he says in the video, at one point there are 5 congregations in 5 different religions, this being one of them here. We're praying for him. And we need to start asking, how do we do this? How do we create the sacred conversation which leads to the end of life in a way that we can embrace life? Understand that death is not the enemy. Understand that death is a part of life. You know, how does that work? So this document right here, the 5 wishes, you're all going to be exposed to it, is just a tool. It is a tool that will help you through this as a family. We've all, I'm sure, been exposed to the whole idea of having a living will or having advance directives, and it gets a little confusing as to what any of that stuff even means. Well, the beauty of the 5 wishes is this replaces all of that, and you don't need a lawyer. If you're a lawyer and make your living doing this, I'm sorry. But this is a legal document that the state of Tennessee recognizes as an advance directive and as a living will. And what are the 5 wishes? Well, that they're really straightforward. That they're the very things you would want to have your family and those you love know that is your wishes, your will. Number 1, the person I want to make health care decisions for me when I can't make them for myself. But who is that? Who is this? Now, this document is not just for the people in this room who are over 90 years of age. This is for all of us. You know, even if you're 30 years of age, you know, what happens if you're in a car accident? You know, terrible things do happen. My mother was 42 years of age when she died. You know, it can happen to any of us. So who is it that you want to make decisions for you if you can't make them for yourself? Wish number 2. My wish for the kind of medical treatment I want or don't want. It's not like saying, take me off and let me die. That's not the point. But here's what I am certain of. In America, we have developed an unholy love affair with technology. And what I mean by that is that we've come to believe I can live my life absolutely any way I want to, and it doesn't matter. Because when I'm broken, the doctor could use that technology to fix me. Well, what every physician in this room knows is that the technology is not that good and the doctor's not that smart. You know, God gave us this body for a reason, and we have an obligation to kind of think about how we are going to live our lives. The doctor can't do that. Because of the issue of technology, I believe that these decisions are driven oftentimes in an inverse proportion by how far the children and grandchildren live from you. So if your grandchildren live in California, beware. Because what they will do to assuage their own guilt is say, do everything you can to help mama. And they're going to keep the machines going. And the easiest thing for the doctor to do is do that very thing. It is absolutely the easiest thing for the doctor to do is keep the process going so that we can say we tried everything we could. And we couldn't keep death away. And yet, what we do as a result of that, in my opinion, is we are torturing our parents, our grandparents, and the people that we love. People spend the last 2 weeks of their life in the intensive care unit with a tube stuck down their throat, in a place where they never turn the lights off, around people who do not know you well enough to love you, and then you die. That is immoral. That is immoral. Now, if the government starts talking about this issue, what happens? People start talking about death panels. Raise your hand if you've ever met anybody who advocated for a death panel. No, you don't know anybody. Okay, well, death panels don't exist. And nobody wants the government to tell us how we're going to die. Nobody wants that. It is ultimately, in my opinion, up to the community of faith to lead this discussion. If we don't do it, I promise you, the medical community will not do it. There's too much money on the table around the technology. There's too much that has nothing to do with the quality of your life. There's too much that doesn't have to do with how you connect to God, about your values, the things that you care about. So either we rise up in this room and say, this is what we claim, and we put our stake in the ground on it, or it won't happen. It won't happen. So, the medical treatment issues are sometimes you don't know what that is. And you can go down a path and stop. You can go down, if I get hit in a car wreck on the way home, Mary, I want to make sure that you keep me alive until you are sure it won't happen. At which point then you can take the ventilator off, okay? We good with that? I'm happy with my life. I want it with my life. I'm happy with my life right now. I want to keep living, so I don't want to give up right now, but it doesn't mean I want to stay a vegetable for the next 10 years. I don't want that. So when it becomes clear, and my doctor friends in the room help advise her that it's not going to work, and we're going to do this together. Now, the same thing's true about any of our medical treatments. You can start and stop them at will. If you go into hospice, you can come out of hospice. You can come out of hospice. Going into hospice doesn't mean that we're going to go dig your grave tomorrow. Going into hospice means we're going to give you quality care toward the end of your life. That's what it means. The truth of all of this is that how do we live our life and live it well? Wish number 3, my wish for how comfortable I want to be. Okay, I'm not good with pain. You may be, but I'm not good with pain. So I want to not be in pain. You just got to be clear about this. Some people, however, would say, look, if the pain medicine is going to make me a pundit and I can't really talk and have conversations, then don't give it to me. Fair enough. What do you want? Don't let somebody else make this decision. What do you want, and communicate it to the people that you love. Wish number 4, my wish for how I want people to treat me. Do you want to just ignore the fact that I'm dying? Or do you want people to come and talk to you? And we recognize this, and we talk about our lives together and our memories that we've had. How do you want people to treat you when it's clear you're about to die? Have you ever thought about that even? Maybe, maybe not. but most of us have not communicated it to others. And last, Michael was the first person I ever heard talk about an ethical will. And I fell in love with this idea 20 years ago when he first mentioned it. But that's what wish number 5 is. My wish for what I want my loved ones to know. What are the things that you value? 20 years from now, what do you want your grandkids to be told about you and about the things that you care about in life, that you want to pass on? You know, look, I promise you they're going to figure out the money. The money's going to get figured out. But what's the rest of the stuff you want to pass on? Well, what is that? And how would it work? So I hope you will take this really seriously. You know, I do believe that watching Raza and Asma deal with these issues themselves is a great starting point. But you don't have to do that. There are other starting points as well. But having the conversation is critical, and it is a sacred conversation. Now, the question is, when do you do this? Well, there's no time in today to do it, but Yom Kippur would probably be a good day to do it with your family. Maybe Rosh Hashanah is a good time. Maybe New Year's, January 1st is. Here's what I would really pitch to you. Do it the day after Thanksgiving. The day after Thanksgiving. We're all together as families. By Friday, we're sick of each other. You can only watch so much football. And this is not a morbid experience. It actually becomes an experience of joy, where families can talk about those things that matter to us. So that's just a thought. Or do it at another time that works for you and your family. But do it. Absolutely do it. So I want to tell you one more story, and then we'll have a couple minutes just for our discussion piece, which is the story of Winnie McKelvey. So Winnie was married to a Methodist minister, George, who was a bit of a card. George died, and Winnie was left alone. Winnie, in growing up with her children, started knitting, and George was gone a lot, and she was in a lot of church meetings, and so just to pass the time, she started knitting, and first started knitting these little dolls that looked like this. Winnie knitted these primarily for her own children, until her own children said, "Mom, I got all the dolls I need." And when they grew up, their grandkids had all the dolls they need. So one day, before George's death, George came to me and said, "Do you think the Church Health Center would like to have these little dolls and give them out to your children?" And I said, "Absolutely. They're incredibly cute." And so I had sort of forgotten about it, and then a month later, about 100 of these appeared on my door. And it sort of gave Winnie a second chance in life, and she just started making these things nonstop. And it was wonderful. And we to this day refer to these things as Winnie's babies. So, moving on, it was now the day after Thanksgiving, and Mary and I get a phone call from Winnie's son who lived in Atlanta. Winnie was living alone in a house in Midtown. All of her children were scattered all over the country. And her son called and said, "Could you go check on Mama, because she doesn't answer the phone. You know, she didn't answer it yesterday. We've been calling for 3 or 4 days, and she doesn't answer the phone. And we're afraid something bad has happened." So, of course, Mary and I go over, we knock on the door, she doesn't answer. The doors are all locked from the inside. This does not look good. So, neither one of us are particularly good about breaking into a house. We find a trowel out in the garage, and it was the Keystone cops watching us get in the back door. But we finally get in. We walk into the kitchen, and then the bedroom's around the corner, and I go first, and I look around the corner, and I can see 2 feet. It was like the Wizard of Oz. And so I go, "Mary, you need to go outside, call the police, because this doesn't look good." So I go in, and Winnie is laid out next to her bed. And it's clear she's dead, only I kneel down, And I start taking her pulse, and she's alive. And I go, Mary, she's alive. Everything's gonna we'll see what happens. And then Mary comes in, and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, Winnie opens her eyes. And she looks at me and she goes, "Oh, hi, Scott." I really have to pee. "Oh, hi, Mary. We've never formally met." I mean, as it turns out, I'm still not quite sure what happened. Apparently, Winnie had been in this weird thing called a fugue state for 3 or 4 days and just wandered around the house. And who knows exactly what happened, but so now we call the ambulance and we get her to the hospital, and it turns out she's fine. Within a week, she's back at her house and doing what she's doing. Now, this was a great opportunity for her family to have the conversation. Winnie was 80 years old, but it was clear things were not good. So, the sad part is they didn't. They didn't. And over the next couple of years, Winnie did this thing. She ended up dying in a nursing home, and it's a really sad end. Very sad end. I wish they had been able to have the conversation, but they didn't. Don't let that happen to you and the people that you love. Commit yourself today to say we're going to do it. Participate in the sacred conversation plan that we're going to have here. So, I want to end with reading you one thing for the mentor in my life, William Sloane Coffin. He's a great rebel. I consider it the only true prophet of God I've ever met. And this is a fantastic book if you're interested. It's called Credo. It's just a collection of things that Phil Coffin said. But finishing with this. The one true freedom in life, is to come to terms with death. And as early as possible. For death is an event that embraces all our lives. And the only way to have a good death is to lead a good life. Lead a good one, full of curiosity, generosity, and compassion. And there's no need at the close of the day to rage against the dying of the light. We can go gentle into that good night. So, Michael, we're going to...
This working? We're going to open it up. We're going to go until 1:15-ish. And then, just so you know, this greatest day of the year here in spiritual terms continues at 1:30. Ruach in the main sanctuary. And for those who wish to continue discussion, Dr. Joe Leadon will be leading a discussion group on Kaddish. You just heard the power and eloquence of his brother. I just forgot to tell you one more thing you may not know, that many of you will be saying at around 7:30 tonight or after the 6:30 to Ki Gadol whenever you break your fast. His wife, Mary, remember the Alka-Seltzer commercial? I can't believe I ate the whole thing. She and her team came up with it in New York City. So I just want to acknowledge that Mary, tonight, many of us who are fasting for 24 hours, we are going to pig out in a kosher way later. And we're going to gorge at our break fast, and we're going to be invoking your line. I can't believe I ate the whole thing. Now, getting back to this.
I just want to ask, is it kosher to pig out? Is that possible?
So let me tell you a true story. People say, Rabbi, you're such a huge proponent of the Church Health Center and volunteering time, you know, is it kosher? And I say, well, I go to Corky's and I don't eat the pork, I eat brisket, right? I like the brisket. Reminds me of my mother was here, my grandmother. So, somebody said, pigs, what do we need pigs for? This is a very frum Jew. I said, didn't your brother have a bypass? He said, yes. I said, thank God for pigs. I hope it lasts 20 years. So, in terms of sacred conversations, and Rabbi, again, what a beautiful compliment you and Scott just gave us in your sermon and his follow-up. But this is not just a one-hit wonder, as I said. On October 27th and November 12th, it's all in this beautiful Take Root brochure of all Temple's adult education offerings. Alex Zaharovich, the chair of the Adult Learning Committee, is here, and Lauren Lusky, our director of congregational learning, Jan Reisman, our program director, the whole team's here. We are going to have two follow-up discussions, one in the morning on October 27th at 10, and one in the evening on November 12th. And it's not going to end with December 31st, because I'm thrilled to announce, and many of you have received this book from me, my college classmate Naomi Levy, who became the first conservative rabbi, female rabbi, in 1980, in the 80s. She wrote a book called Talking to God. It's my favorite prayer book. Many of you have. Here it is. She also wrote a book called To Begin Again, Finding Strength After Difficult Times. Why did she write this prayer book? She wrote this prayer book because she said, you know, Michael, when we went to rabbinical school, she's a conservative rabbi, so she did more Talmud than I did. She says, you know all the prayers in Hebrew? And I said, yeah. Why, Naomi? She said, have you ever read what they mean? I said, sure, why? She says, do you really believe all of it? I said, well, that's why we chant it really fast. So Naomi said, I'm going to write a prayer book and not even put that I'm a rabbi on the cover. I'm just going to write Naomi Levy. And I am going to write prayers for every conceivable moment in life, including today's topic of sacred conversations. And if you can't believe what you're reading, I failed. She also wrote a book called Hope Will Find. Anyway, this is all part of this series. We don't want you to think that it's just about one service or one talk. Scott is launching these sacred conversations. So let's have time now. We have at least 15 minutes to have some interaction with Dr. Morris, Reverend Morris. And then please, before you leave the Edelson Wax Hall, in the back where Stacy, Paula, Jan, Katie are, make sure you get the 5 wishes. Look out for October 27th, November 12th, and April. It took a while to get her, but we have, in next April, you look for it, Naomi will be leaving LA to spend the weekend with us. So, without further ado, questions. And let's hear it again for Dr. Morris. Wow. Okay.
I'm happy to answer questions, but has anybody here had the conversation with your family, and if so, how did it go? Okay, great. So, how do we have, you guys?
Yes, you guys.
I don't think that.
Neither.
My name is Fran Kaufman, and for those that knew my late husband who passed away about 3 months ago, I literally had this conversation with my 2 daughters and their husbands not even 3 weeks ago when I was visiting in Maryland. And I can't, it was, because of the time frame of it all, it was highly emotional at best. And initially I thought that by having this conversation with my 4 children, that it would help my daughters and my sons-in-law who are like my sons. And as we kept going with the conversation, it got more uplifting, I found. And I found that my daughters had more strength in them to deal with this than initially that I had thought. Well, the part that I want to share with you is that my son-in-law, Tom, called me not 3 days ago. And he said to me, Fran, I have been thinking so much about our conversation. And what he wanted to share with me is all those thoughts that I had about someday when I leave this earth as my husband did, but that which I have been doing with and for my own children for 45 years. He says, you have already done all those things that you don't think that you've done. And he said, because your legacy to your children and all your grandchildren, they feel it already. That I think that by starting these conversations, because I'm long from finished with them, that I didn't realize I had the impact on them that I did. And the only reason I even started this conversation with the four of them was because of my late husband. So Dr. Morris, when you talk about if you lead a good life, you'll have a good life thereafter, I can promise you my husband did that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us.
I'll be very brief. It's not a privilege, but I had two of my four parents I have buried. One lived a very long life suffering, not pain-wise, but just always going through battles of cancer, and never spoke to us. Never spoke to my brother and I about really what we were going through and how to process it. And in her death, I acquired my stepfather, who I had to go through that process because of a Medicaid issues. You don't have the choice. You have to talk about this and go through it. And I know for being younger and bearing a parent, and then he just died suddenly. Then he just dropped dead. So having gone through both ways as a child and with my kids, it was definitely a lot different, and they processed it a lot easier to be able to speak about it. And as a parent-child, with my mother, we were always stepping on shells not to talk about it, even though she died cancer-free with 20 years of fighting cancer. So it was really both different ways. I don't know if there's any way to skin that cat any easier, but as they talk about it.
Yeah, so, look, y'all, this is serious stuff. I mean, this is not light stuff, but like it matters. You know, we spend like an incredible amount of our time doing stuff that doesn't matter a hill of beans to anybody. I mean, what did you do last Thursday night? Could you tell me? Probably not, but I promise you once you do this, you'll remember this. Remember this? Yes, ma'am.
Question. Could you give us the author and name of the book?
Oh, the author of the book I read from that, William Sloane Coffin, Coffin. No. Oh, what? Oh, sure, yes, right, good. We'll do that, yes. Okay, anybody else want to share their experience of having it?
I'm an only child, and my parents had that discussion for as long as I can remember. My mother became senile at 86, and she died at 91. And although both my parents had living wills and did not want to have anything extended, at one point I asked her, I said, well, you know, if your heart stopped in the hall, would you want them to revive you? She said, yes. This is not the person that I grew up with. So it's just a very interesting issue to think about.
Right. The point is that people can change their mind, and that's okay, you know? And so one point that I have not made is I think you ought to do this every Thanksgiving, the Friday after, because it might change, and life goes on. So look, there are a number of physicians in the room. The physicians, I'd love for somebody to speak up about, does this make you nervous or unwieldy, or you think this is a good thing? Here, let me give you this.
I don't know how to.
Okay, so what she just said happens so much, y'all, it is sickening. So a good friend of Mary and I's, when I finish the story, you'll understand probably a better friend of Mary's than mine, was on the board of Methodist Hospital for almost 30 years. No exaggeration. He had never been sick a day in his life. He ends up getting pneumonia. He's 92 years old. Pneumonia, an old man's best friend. Right? And it's an easy way to die sometimes. And that's exactly what happened to him. In the middle of the night, he has a living will. He's on the board of Methodist for 30 years. But it's the middle of the night on the weekend. So what do? We call a code, the interns come, they put a tube in. Next thing I know, he's in the intensive care unit. They saved him. Really? They saved him? And so Mary and I go to see him. Now, there's a past here in that before Mary and I got married, he was an amorous toward her. And so I'm going there now sort of partly as a pastor, partly as a doctor, talking to him. And he's awake, but he's on a ventilator. It's not going well. And so I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, I think, as a pastor or a doctor. And then Mary goes, "Get out of here." And Mary comes up to him and says, "Do you want a kiss?" I'm telling you, he is trying to pull the tube out of his mouth. I mean, she kisses him on the head, but that's not what he wanted. So, I mean, the reason this happens is because we haven't fully fought this battle. And it is a battle at some level. You know, and right now we're losing. We're losing because in America we believe in Descartes and Plato. And what I mean by that is that they convinced us that you can take a human being and separate them into a person into a body and a spirit. And we put the body on one side and said it was the purview of science and medicine. We put the spirit on the other. So it's okay for people of faith to mess around with your spirit, but we shouldn't care about our bodies. And death is the enemy. That death is the enemy. And unless we, as people of faith, were to step up and say, you know, there's another way to look at this. And we really want to, you know, follow a different leader than Plato and Descartes. But there is another way of doing this. But if we don't speak out, we've defined the default method. Yes, ma'am. Who do you tell about a living will? I mean, you can't tell too many people. But it needs to go beyond your lawyer, that's for sure. I mean, the hospitals, to their defense, have actually gotten a lot better in the last few years. I mean, that, you know, Paula works for a hospital, and the hospitals are actually doing a whole lot better. This living will thing, all the hospitals in Memphis have now approached their entire staff around the 5 wishes. And so the hospitals are very attuned to the idea of the 5 wishes right now. That's a really good thing. So they're attuned to their own employees, so they're going to be much more attuned to you as you go in. So if somebody gets admitted to the hospital, you absolutely need to say, I have a 5 wishes document. Yes, ma'am.
Time I go for a checkup, any kind of test, they go, do you have a will? You want the information. So, I mean, it's there. They ask.
Right. We are absolutely getting better. We just got to keep getting better.
I just found it ironic that they even ask about living wills with things like outpatient mental health services and crisis services where it shouldn't come up, but then it does.
Life and death happen. You know, none of us plan our death, for the most part, you know. So these issues matter. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. How do you have a conversation with a parent who may not want to have it?
Yeah, that's a great. How do you have a conversation with the parent who doesn't want to have it? Well, look, it's not a perfect world. And you can't make it happen. If your mother doesn't want to have a conversation, and a lot of you are going to encounter that, then fine. You know, you're not going to have it with her, but have it with your kids. You know, you don't become your mother in that regard. So, I mean, look, you can't force it on somebody. I mean, and that actually happens a lot. Especially older folks just don't talk to me about that stuff. You know, I'm going to live forever, I know it. Or I'm going to, you know, be here and be part of the 15%. I'm going to live to be 120 and it's going to be over.
My husband and I have 4 children. God worked with us many years, but we've always had a feeling that there's a chance we might not. And each one of our 4 children has a box, and in that box is their birth certificates and their little bracelets that they had when they were newborn at the hospital, and all of their candles as they grew old. So my husband and I added a letter. We each wrote a letter to our children. knowing that if I didn't say this kind of thing to them as I was gone, that they would be able to leave it, know what I wanted.
What a beautiful way to do the fifth wish. Okay, I'm turning it over to the boss. Paula.
First of all, thanks to all of you for having the strength and the courage to come listen to this conversation today. This is not an easy topic, and we are so grateful to all of you for being here. Scott, you did an outstanding job, and I know everyone is so grateful to you. So I know Scott will stay around for a few minutes. I know our rabbi wants us to stay on schedule, so we'll hand out the 5 wishes. We have enough for 1 per person. We are going to get more, but right now, because there are so many of us here, we have, I know you want to say, can I have 5? Well, no, you cannot have 5. So, but we will have more for our future conversations. And again, Scott, thank you so much. Thanks for what you're doing in the community.